All right. Hey, guys, want to go and give you some notes about the Protestant Reformation. Of course, we know that that was started by Martin Luther, a German monk who decided that he was upset with the Catholic Church. We know he put these 95 theses or arguments on the door of the church saying all the things he was upset with. He didn't think the church should charge money to get to heaven. Those were called indulgences. He believed that the Bible should have been read by everyone and that the Bible was what the rules of what life should have been lived instead of the Pope making up those human rules. So he starts a new religion. It becomes Protestant, and it's also a new church called the Lutheran Church, named after him. So what happens is the Catholic Church, which had always been the only Christian church, now is split. You're either Catholic or Protestant. Well, the Catholic Church didn't want to lose their power. They didn't want to split. And so they come up with what's known as the Counter-Reformation. They want to bring people back into the Catholic Church, and they want to wipe out the Protestants, even if that means by force with armies. And so armies were sent out, and wars were had, and people who were Protestant were, caught and tried and beheaded and burned at the stake if they were a Protestant. The church also set up seminaries to train priests, to get more and more priests to try to bring people into the Catholic Church and bring them back. And they set up these group of basically missionaries called Jesuits to spread Catholic ideas and to fight heresy. In other words, to fight against these Protestants. And the Jesuits eventually will come to America. And if you know anything about Xavier University, the Musketeers, they were started by the Jesuits. In France, the French Protestant became known as the Huguenots, right? And the Huguenots were very passionate about becoming Protestant, and really France was a very Catholic country, but these Huguenots came with force and an army, and they started wars, and the Civil War breaks out, and it lasts nearly 30 years, and it's a war between Catholics and Protestants. And remember, Catholics and Protestants are both Christians, so Christians are killing other Christians, all in the name of, our religion is better than yours. Eventually, Henry IV, who's a French king who's Protestant, realized the fighting's got to stop. And he realized that the majority of people were Catholic, and they wanted a Catholic king. So he becomes a new king, and he decides, to save the peace, even though I'm Protestant, I'm going to become Catholic. And he does that simply to bring the country back, to stabilize it and bring it back into a safe place. And so, but he did allow the Protestants to worship freely. So there was no more killing of Protestants and no Protestants killing Catholics. So it was a good thing. Over in Germany, famous war called the 30 Years' War starts same reason, because the Protestants and Catholics are, at war trying to force the other out. This happens in Germany because that's where Martin Luther starts this. And the German kings, and through all these little nations, German nations, they were tired of the Catholic Pope and the Catholic leaders having all the power and all the land. And so the kings set up armies, and for 30 years they fought. And the Protestants, the Germans got help from other countries. The Protestants got help from France, Sweden, Denmark, and England. And the Catholics basically were people from Spain and Italy. And so it's almost like this mini little world war that happened, all in the name of, trying to decide which religion was best. After the 30 years of war, destruction, and death, what happens, the results was it weakened Spain because of all the money spent and the lives lost, and then it actually made France a much stronger and more powerful country. Another result was that the Spanish Reformation decided at that point, we don't want any Protestants. They're not welcome. And they were basically kicked out. Spain said, we are going to be Catholic and only Catholic. And so they actually kicked out all religions. If you were a Jew or a Muslim, you were out. And they did this through this very famous time or event called the Spanish Inquisition, where thousands of heretics, people who were Protestants or Jews or Muslims, were considered enemies or heretics of the Catholic Church. And they were tortured, and they were burned at the stake, and they were killed. And Spain became just a Catholic nation. Here's a map that, if you look, shows you Europe and what churches came. So if you imagine this whole thing is Europe, right? And for 1,500 years, it was all the Catholic Church. But then after Martin Luther starts the Lutheran Church, so that's this pink. Notice that's all here. This is where Martin Luther lived and started his new church, and it spread this way. So these are Protestants. They're known as Lutherans. Calvinist, John Calvin, right, is up here in Scotland and in the Netherlands and down here in Geneva. The Church of England, we're going to learn about in just a second, was started by King Henry VIII right here in England, simply because he was mad at the Pope because he wanted to divorce his wife and couldn't. And so we'll learn about that. This Church of England was also called Anglican. The green represents how big the Catholic Church and how much land and power they had. The blue is Orthodox. That was a Greek-speaking church. And then, of course, the Muslims are not Christian. They Islam, all down here. They also at one point had conquered Spain and moved into France, but the Christians had pushed them out. So that's the map of Europe. Now, up in England, which is here, right, King Henry VIII is going to be the reason that they become Protestant. They were Catholic, now they're Protestant. And so he's the king of England. He's married 6 times. 2 of his wives are beheaded simply because he's trying to have a wife give him a son. Had a couple wives, was able to give him a daughter, had some wives that couldn't give children at all. He wants a son to be the next king, the heir to his throne. And so one of his wives, Catherine, gives him a daughter. He's upset. He's already got another woman set up to be his next wife. He simply asked the church, the Pope, the Catholic Church, hey, can I just get an annulment? I want to annul my wife. It's a fancy way of just saying divorce. I want to divorce her so that I can get married to someone else. And the Pope was like, no, I'm not going to let you do that. You can't just divorce your wife for no good reason. And he refuses. So King Henry says, well, heck, I'll just have the Archbishop, the second in charge of the church. I'll just have him annul the marriage. Does that. The Pope gets ticked. The Pope says you're excommunicated, which means, you can't go to heaven. You can't be a part of the church. And King Henry's like, well, fine, I'll start my own church. I'm the king, right? And so he declares himself head of the Church of England, which becomes known as the Anglican Church, and it's a Protestant church. Okay, that's basically how the Protestant Reformation starts in England. It will continue on back and forth, lots of blood and death, as Queen Mary I will, when she becomes queen, wants England to be Catholic again. She's known as Bloody Mary because she has Protestants arrested and burns more than 300 at the stake. She has them put to death. Bloody Mary, forcing people to be Catholic again. Her half-sister Elizabeth becomes queen. Some say that maybe she actually had her sister killed. Queen Elizabeth then brings back the Protestant church to England. So it's this back and forth thing going on. And then eventually a group of Calvin followers become known as Puritans, which is different than the Anglican Church. They want to purify the church and make it even more Protestant, if you will. They become known as Puritans, and they are persecuted by King James, and the Puritans, also known as Pilgrims, will then have to come to America and settle in New England, and that's why the Pilgrims came, because they were being, if you will, persecuted by the king at the time. So that's a little bit of the story of the Reformation and how it came bloody and violent and then came into England. So please make sure you turn in your notes, put your name on it, and turn your notes in today. And hope you all have a great rest of the day. See ya.